Rick Gladiator, just like Naruto's Kabuto with age 32, his love of The story starts in the mountains where Rick is training. He is thrown to the ground while his trainer watches from a hill above. His trainer, known as the Orichalcum Fist, takes pride in being the strongest on the continent. One of the female trainers comments that the E-rank test shouldn't be a problem. Another male trainer adds that he's actually worried Rick might destroy the testing ground. The scene then shifts to the city where the E-rank promotion test is being held. Rick attempts to take the test. He meets Elisa, a former coworker who is now working as the registration receptionist. She mentions that she remembers him quitting his job suddenly and is even more surprised to learn that he has become an adventurer. Rick acknowledges Elisa's surprise because starting as an adventurer at the age of 30 is unusual. Normally, people start as F-rank apprentices in their teens and progress to novice E-rank adventurers within 2 years. Suddenly, a drunken man approaches and harasses Elisa. Rick intervenes, calming the man by gripping his shoulder and stomach. People in the registration hall watch the commotion as Rick calmly leads the drunken man to sit on the floor, unconscious and foaming at the mouth. Rick tries to lead the scene, lecturing on responsible drinking and nodding to the onlookers. Elisa then gives him his exam ticket. Rick's registration number is 4242. In Japanese, 4242 can be interpreted as a bad luck number because 4 can be read as she and 2 as ni, forming shiny, which is a homophone for dying or death. After Rick leaves, some people in the registration hall recognize the drunken man who harassed Elisa. It was Donald, a former A-rank adventurer who was wanted for assault. They are surprised to find a palm mark engraved deep into his steel armor. Just for your information, there are 6 adventurer ranks, starting from the weakest, F-rank, apprentices who find it dangerous to fight even low-level monsters. E-rank, recognized as professionals but still struggle against low-level monsters. D-rank, uncommon, as most adventurers advance straight to C-rank. C-rank can regularly defeat low-level monsters but struggle with high-level ones. B-rank can easily defeat high-level monsters solo. A rank can effortlessly defeat swarms of high-level monsters solo. Rick takes the first test, a medical examination. His height is measured at 174 centimeters, and his age is recorded as 32. The examiner is surprised by his age, causing him to sweat nervously. Next, Rick takes the magic test. This test uses a crystal ball as a medium. Participants place their hands on the ball and use magic to create light inside it. The intensity of the light determines their magical energy level. Participants' scores range from D to C, but Rick receives an F-. Other participants look down on him for his low score. However, after Rick leaves, the crystal ball suddenly shatters. Rick then takes the third test, the strength test. The test uses a slime bag as the medium. Participants must direct all their strength into a single blow targeting the slime bag. Participant member 4237, Freed Diremute, an 11-year-old Duke's second son considered a prodigy with C-rank equivalent magic, is up. Rick and the other participants watch eagerly as Freed prepares his magic. Fire surrounds Freed's body, then condenses into a small flame on his right hand. The other participants are amazed by his actions. After chanting his spell, Level 3, Nature Composed Magic, Flame Eliminate, he throws the fireball at the slime bag, hitting it perfectly. Participants and examiners praise him, calling him a genius. However, Rick recognizes that the fireball is too tiny and weak compared to what his trainer used to use. With his unadorned mind, Rick thinks that perhaps Freed's magic is just different, and that he's able to compress it into such a tiny form. When it's Rick's turn to take the slime bag test, the examiner advises him to stop. Considering his age and low magic score, the examiner doubts his potential for growth. Rick agrees that he's starting very late, and at his age, it would be hard to improve his magic ability. But he's already made up his mind to take the test. Rick has been training hard with slime bags, punching them 50,000 times daily with bare hands. However, he didn't know that the green slime bag is the weakest, and the gold slime bag he used to train with is the strongest. He mistakenly thought the green slime bag was stronger than the gold one. Rick punches the green slime bag without holding back, destroying it completely along the wall behind it. Green slime is splattered everywhere, and a huge hole is left in the wall. The examiner and participants gasp at Rick's strength. Freed the prodigy is not pleased with his thunder being stolen by Rick, the older participant. He plans to teach Rick a lesson in the next test, his specialty, the defense magic test. Just for your information, the slime bag is made from slime-type monsters and encased in leather. It excels at absorbing attacks, whether they are magical or martial arts based. The green slime bag is the lowest level of the slime bags. There are 6 levels of slime bags starting from the weakest: green slime bag, blue slime bag, yellow slime bag, red slime bag, silver slime bag, and gold slime bag. During the fourth test, the examiner was exhausted from testing Rick's magic defense. The participants watched in astonishment as Rick managed to defend against a level 4 nature-composed magic using only level 1 nature-composed magic. The examiner informed Rick that he would proceed with level 5 nature-composed magic and suggested Rick use a higher level of defense magic. However, Rick could only use level 1 nature-composed magic for both attack and defense. This impressed the examiner even more because, despite only using level 1 magic, Rick could control it with such precision. The examiner then launched his level 5 nature-composed magic, Shock Cyclone. This magic possessed a lot of destructive power, creating a strong cyclone that destroyed everything in its path. The participants were in awe of the power of Shock Cyclone, a level 5 nature-composed magic. Sylvester L. Cernia, Knight of the Realm and First-Class Knight, saw the Shock Cyclone from afar. Curious about the commotion, he came to the exam ground. He was informed that an F-rank adventurer had destroyed a green slime bag with a bare-fisted punch, and then blocked a level 5 nature-composed magic with a level 1 spell. When he read Rick's registration form, he was amazed by his age and experience, noting that Rick had been a receptionist for 14 years at the guild's Tiger Road Sinquat branch. Sarcastically, he joked with the examiner, asking if the title of receptionist was awarded to someone who had defeated a dragon. After taking all the preliminary tests, Rick was sitting on a bench accompanied by Renette. They were discussing the tests Rick had just taken. Rick was confident he would get a perfect score on the written test because he had been a receptionist for 14 years. For the practical tests, Renette assured Rick that he would be fine, noting the incredible growth he had shown over the last 2 years. Suddenly, Fried showed up. He was upset because his plan to show off his genius and make a magnificent debut had been thwarted by Rick, who stood out more than he did. Then his big sister, Angelica, arrived. Fried complained to her that he was being bullied by a 40-ish-year-old man. Rick disagreed with being called 40-ish, since he was in his 30s, but Angelica insisted on calling Rick a 40-ish-year-old man because her brother said so. Angelica then challenged Rick to a duel and dropped her left glove in front of him. Rick picked up the glove without realizing that doing so meant he was accepting a challenge. The duel took place in the stadium. Angelica announced herself as a knight second class of the Knights of the Realm. According to the Kingdom of Philheim's rules on duels, each participant could propose one condition. She proposed that the loser must serve the victor until death. Fried cheered for his older sister from the audience. Rick didn't object to Angelica's terms. He asked Renette about the rank of Knight Second Class in the Knights of the Realm. Renette explained that the Knights of the Realm were protectors of peace in the Kingdom of Philheim, and a Knight Second Class was equivalent to a B-rank adventurer. She suggested Rick go easy on Angelica. Rick disagreed with going easy on her, pointing out that he was just an F-rank adventurer fighting against a knight of B-rank level who could defeat high-level monsters on her own. However, Renette made a valid point. He had been trained by a party that prided itself on being the strongest on the continent, the Orichalcum Fist. With renewed confidence, Rick stood up to face Angelica. Angelica mocked Rick as an F-rank adventurer, assuring him she would make allowances and refrain from killing him. Then she made her first move, Flickering Feet. As a swordsman-type knight, she strengthened her body and weapons with magic, enhancing her movement speed. She moved towards Rick incredibly fast, but her slash missed. She claimed it was just a greeting move and that she intentionally made herself slower. After she spoke, the gate she hit split in two. Fried cheered proudly at his sister's actions. Angelica then used Flickering Feet again, but from Rick's point of view, she moved incredibly slowly, much slower than his normal running speed. He was astonished that she mentioned the flash while moving so slowly. He was so astonished that he forgot to dodge Angelica's attack until Renette reminded him. Angelica couldn't believe Rick dodged her attack with ease, as only a handful of Knight First Class could properly react to her speed. Angelica repeated her move, Flickering Feet, again. This time, Rick was certain she moved really slowly. His confidence grew as he noticed that a B-rank adventurer moved at such a slow speed. Suddenly, Angelica tripped on a stone, causing her to spin forward uncontrollably while holding her sword at blazing speed. Rick barely managed to dodge Angelica's attack. Her sword ended up stuck in the stadium wall. Not knowing it was unintentional, Rick took back his arrogance. With a face covered in sweat, Angelica talked big and pretended it was on purpose to cover up. She then prepared to make her next move, an improved version of her Flickering Feet. It was 3 times faster and she could only use it 3 times in a single fight. She launched her move, Flickering Feet 1000. But again, from Rick's point of view, she was 3 times faster than before but still slow. He dodged Angelica's attack easily. She couldn't believe her Flickering Feet 1000 was dodged so easily. She launched the same move a second time and again Rick dodged it easily. Having already used her move twice, she had only one chance left. She charged towards Rick with the same move, but this time Rick intended to take on her attack and counter her. Unfortunately, before she got close to Rick, she tripped on the stone again. She fell and slid on the ground towards Rick. Rick mistook it for an intentional move and an improved version of her attack, so he punched the ground with all his might. The ground shattered, and Angelica was flung away by the blast. The ground was destroyed like a crater, with Angelica sitting on its edge, trembling in fear. Rick, simple-minded as he was, believed that Angelica's every move was intentional. He was amazed that she managed to dodge his attacks. Stepping up from the crater, he prepared for another round. However, Angelica, at a loss for words, surrendered. She admitted she let him win this time when Rick asked why. As she started to leave, Rick reminded her of her earlier proposal that the loser must serve the victor until death. With all of her remaining strength, Angelica used flickering feet, thousand to swiftly run away. After Angelica left, Renette approached Rick and congratulated him on his victory, even though he didn't fully realize it. She reminded him that the results of the preliminary tests were coming soon and informed him that Broston and the others from the Orichalcum Fist would be arriving shortly. A child reading a storybook captivated by its pictures. One page showed a brave fighter with a sword and shield battling a monster under a glowing magic sign. The child's thoughts echoed the tale. Defeating the monster Kaiser Alcipiat would grant the treasure of the Akashic Records, which could fulfill any wish. Turning the page, the fighter appeared wounded, unable to defeat the monster. Another turn showed the fighter retreating. The story suggested that one of the children dreaming of becoming an adventurer could still obtain the treasure. The scene shifted to the child's face, eyes wide with excitement and belief in the story. This child, filled with dreams of adventure, was young Rick Gladiator. Elisa, the exam receptionist, stood at the front of the class, ready to announce the results of the preliminary tests. She explained that magical energy would be transmitted to the exam tickets, and those that glowed blue indicated a passing score. The successful candidates would move on to the second test, a mock battle, the next day. Rick sat anxiously with Renette, his exam ticket resting on the table. He worried about his results, questioning whether he had made it through. Renette reassured him, urging him to have more confidence in himself. Rick appreciated her kindness, though he lamented being older, wishing he were a decade younger. Renette emphasized the importance of passing, joking that if he failed, his training would be tripled. Rick, feeling the pressure, exclaimed his fear of not making it. Suddenly, Rick's ticket began to glow. He grabbed it with both hands, watching as it turned blue. Overjoyed, he celebrated, showing the ticket to Renette. She congratulated him warmly, sharing in his success. Rick and Renette exited the room, the tension easing from Rick's shoulders as he reflected on the announcement of the exam results. He had been truly terrified, the fear of failure weighing heavily on his mind. As they walked, an unpleasant smell caught Rick's attention, causing him to wrinkle his nose in distaste. A blond man approached them with a confident stride. He introduced himself as Raster Diremute, the eldest son of the House of Diremute, which governed the northern lands. Raster's focus was solely on Renette, addressing her with grandiose compliments. Both Renette and Rick were taken aback by his over-the-top mannerisms, Rick instinctively covering his nose to block out the overpowering scent. Raster continued his conversation with Renette, asking for her name. She responded with a composed and straightforward expression. Raster praised her name effusively, his attention never wavering. Meanwhile, Rick silently speculated if Raster was also taking the test, feeling a mix of curiosity and annoyance. When Rick introduced himself, Raster dismissed him as a lackluster, middle-aged bore, a comment that left Rick feeling as though he'd been pricked by a needle. Raster then boldly declared that he had lost his heart to Renette and invited her to join him in the north as his second wife. Both Renette and Rick were shocked by his audacity. Rick quickly intervened, pretending that Renette was his girlfriend in an attempt to protect her from Raster's advances. Raster, irritated by the interruption, questioned Rick's competence and ridiculed him further. With a flourish, Raster revealed his red A-rank badge, mocking Rick for still being an apprentice F-rank at his age. He divulged that he had been promoted to E-rank at the age of 14 and was now an A-rank adventurer and the examiner for the upcoming mock battle. Rick was stunned by this revelation, the reality of the challenge ahead dawning on him. Raster, still harboring a grudge, left with a parting threat, vowing to demonstrate the vast difference in their abilities during the mock battle. He insinuated that once he proved his superiority, Renette would see the error of her ways. Rick, feeling the weight of the situation, hoped fervently that he wouldn't have to face Raster in the mock battle. As Rick watched Raster leave, he noticed Renette standing close by, holding his hand. Startled, he quickly pulled away, apologizing for his earlier deception. To his surprise, Renette reassured him that she didn't mind at all. In fact, she admitted that his actions had made her happy and helped her out of a difficult situation. Rick, looking at her shyly, felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. At a fancy restaurant, Raster sat in the corner, a glass of wine in his hand and a cold bottle on the table beside him. He seethed with frustration, recalling his earlier encounter with Rick. The man's audacity and lack of respect had struck a nerve. Raster fumed internally, convinced of his own superiority and the natural order that placed people like him above the likes of Rick. His brooding was interrupted when Freed and Angelica appeared in front of him, both in tears. They fell to their knees, clutching Raster's feet and crying out his name. Startled, Raster demanded to know what had happened. Freed, tears streaming down his face, recounted how a 40-ish-year-old commoner had bullied him during the first test. Angelica added, her voice shaking, that the same man had used the covenant of the duel to protect himself and had nearly subjected her to a terrible indignity. Raster's anger flared at the thought of someone daring to mistreat members of the noble house of Diarmute. As he listened, Raster's mind began to piece together the description of the offender. He recalled Rick's approximate age and demeanor from their earlier encounter. Could it be the same person? Raster's thoughts churned with indignation and resolve. He asked Freed if he remembered the examinee's number. Freed, still tearful, mentioned that the number sounded ominously like it signified an imminent demise. Raster's grin widened, a plan forming in his mind. The pieces fit together perfectly. He had encountered the same 40-ish-year-old who had dared to challenge the House of Diarmute. This affront would not go unpunished. Raster's resolve hardened as he contemplated the upcoming mock battle. He would use the opportunity to teach Rick a lesson and restore the dignity of his family. Rick and Reenet walked together in a narrow alley, the upcoming mock battle weighing heavily on Rick's mind. His lack of confidence was evident. As they neared the testing grounds, Rick voiced his concerns, wondering aloud about the challenges he might face, especially if he encountered Raster, whom he now referred to as North. Suddenly, a man in butler attire appeared before them, introducing himself as Lynx Lorat. Lynx explained that he would be Rick's examiner for the second test, overseeing all examinees with numbers above 4,200 who had passed the preliminary test. Rick felt a surge of relief, thankful that he wouldn't be facing Raster. Lynx expressed surprise at Rick's late start in adventuring, having switched careers from receptionist to adventurer at the age of 30. Rick admitted his tardiness but was buoyed by Lynx's enthusiastic encouragement. Lynx revealed that he had begun his own adventuring career at 24 and was now striving to reach a rank at the age of 40, having finally achieved B rank after nearly 20 years of effort. Inspired by Lynx's determination and shared middle-aged perspective, Rick felt a renewed sense of purpose. Lynx's words resonated deeply with him, and he found comfort in the fact that someone else understood his late-blooming ambition. The two men, driven by their dreams, formed an instant bond. Rick extended his hand to Lynx, expressing his eagerness to learn from him during the mock battle. Lynx, with a warm smile, accepted the handshake, promising to give his all in the test without playing favorites. They even made plans to get a drink together after the battle, a gesture of camaraderie that lifted Rick's spirits even further. Unbeknownst to them, Raster was eavesdropping nearby. As Rick, Reenet, and Lynx parted ways, Lynx reflected on the strength he had felt in Rick's handshake, recognizing the extensive training Rick had undergone. This realization spurred Lynx to redouble his own efforts, motivated by the fire that burned in Rick despite his age. Raster, watching from the shadows, called out to Lynx with a condescending tone. He referred to Lynx as a third-rater and demanded a personal word with him, a sinister grin spreading across his face. The encounter hinted at further complications and challenges awaiting Rick in the ongoing tests. Rick standing in the exam participant lounge with Reenet, a bright smile lighting up his face. Reenet noticed his unusually good mood and commented on it, to which Rick responded cheerfully, feeling buoyed by the events of the day. Suddenly, a male exam receptionist appeared at the door with an important announcement. He informed the participants with numbers 4,200 and higher that their scheduled examiner, Lynx Lorat, had suddenly taken ill. Rick was puzzled, remembering how healthy Lynx had seemed just a little while ago. The receptionist continued, stating that Raster Diarmute would now be their examiner. Rick took a sip of his drink, trying to recall where he had heard the name Raster Diarmute before. Reenet reminded him that Raster was the cologne-wearing man they had encountered the previous day. The realization hit Rick hard, causing him to gasp and spit out his drink. He couldn't believe his misfortune. Reenet explained that Raster might be related to the two individuals they had met the previous day, Angelica and her brother. Rick's mind raced, connecting the dots and realizing the implications of this connection. The other participants in the lounge were equally concerned. One participant lamented the change in examiner, suggesting it was all over for them now. Another participant, unfamiliar with Raster, asked for more information. The first participant explained that Raster was the eldest son of a prestigious noble house who had achieved a rank at age 17 and was known as the Man of 1,000 Abilities. However, his other nickname, the F-Rank Crusher, was what truly worried them. Raster was notorious for harassing examinees he took an interest in, making their lives miserable during the tests. Rick's worry deepened. He realized that he had likely caught Raster's eye enough to become a target for his infamous harassment. The looming mock battle now seemed even more daunting, and Rick felt the weight of the upcoming challenge pressing down on him. The room's atmosphere grew tense as the participants braced themselves for the ordeal ahead, each wondering how they would fare under the scrutiny of the formidable and unpredictable Raster Diremute. At the stadium, Raster stood alongside Link's Lorot, exuding an air of superiority. He began to cast a spell, intoning the incantation with practiced precision. The spell, level 4 nature-composed magic, Blizzard Rockshot, caused rounded ice stones to materialize around him. With a swift motion, he launched the icy projectiles at Lynx. The barrage sent Lynx crashing to the ground, enveloped in a cloud of ice dust. Raster regarded the fallen Lynx with disdain, muttering about the inherent flaws of the lowborn. His arrogance was palpable, a stark contrast to the genuine determination and resilience Lynx had shown earlier. As Raster basked in his moment of triumph, a butler appeared at the stadium gate. The butler called out to Raster, who turned with a dismissive attitude, inquiring curtly what the man wanted. Rick wandered through the alley, feeling confused and worried about the upcoming mock battle. Renet watched him closely. Rick was anxious because he had to face Raster, a powerful A-rank adventurer who disliked him. As an F-rank adventurer, Rick felt unprepared, knowing only 2 basic spells. He feared failing the test, which would lead to triplet training, something he was sure he couldn't survive. Leaving would have the same consequence. Rick felt trapped, believing he was doomed no matter what he did. Renet knelt in front of him, trying to reassure him. She asked if he lacked confidence, and Rick admitted that others had always told him he couldn't succeed because he started adventuring so late. Renet suggested a different perspective. If negative words could shake his confidence, positive words could boost it. She told Rick she believed in him, that he was strong enough to pass the test and defeat Raster. Her words gave Rick hope. She stood up and asked if he trusted her. Rick, moved by her support, stood up too. He thanked her, feeling his confidence returning. Renet's belief in him turned his fear into determination, readying him to face the challenges ahead with renewed resolve. A stranger in a concealing robe approached Rick and Renet. The stranger greeted Rick, noting his participation in the upcoming test and offering to tell his fortune for free. Rick, intrigued by the offer, agreed and sat down despite Renet's cautious look. As Rick took his seat, Renet noticed a spell on the chair and tried to warn him, but it was too late. Rick vanished instantly upon sitting. The stranger then revealed his identity with a triumphant laugh. It was Freed, a master of deception. Freed's victory was short-lived. An explosion blasted through the wall, splitting the crystal ball in 2. Renet grabbed Freed by his collar, dangling him precariously in front of the gaping hole. Her gaze was fierce as she demanded to know where Rick had been sent. Freed, initially defiant, quickly changed his tune when Renet flicked her finger, causing his eyelashes to fall. Fearful, he confessed that the teleportation spell, although highly advanced, had a range limit of 100 meters. He assured her that Rick couldn't have gone far. Rick, dazed from the teleportation, found himself behind the testing site, surrounded by Raster's hitmen, led by Raster's butler. The butler apologized, explaining that Rick would have to go to sleep for a while. Despite Rick's confusion, the butler confirmed that he was indeed the target, being a personal guard of the Diremute family. They planned to make Rick fail the test without even participating. As the butler unsheathed his dual swords, Rick panicked, realizing he was no match for their B-rank equivalent strength. Just then, Rick's trainers, the Orichalcum party, Aliceret Drackle, Mizet Eldwarf, and Broston Ashork, appeared on a nearby hill. They greeted Rick cheerfully, while the butler's men looked on in confusion and awe. One of the butlers, wielding a broad square sword, approached Rick threateningly, but Rick tried to cover for his trainers, claiming the men were helping him loosen up before the test. Broston easily caught the butler's punch, commenting on his unbalanced reinforcement of his arm and healing the butler's hand effortlessly. Mizet, showing off his newly developed super flame cannon Kun, Juliet revised, fired at the butlers, causing further chaos. Rick, trying to prevent escalation, pleaded for the butlers to withdraw, warning them of the danger they faced. Aliceret, initially confused by the situation, became furious when one of the butlers threatened her. Her eyes glowed red and she unleashed powerful magic, devastating the area around them. The butlers, realizing too late who they were up against, recognized the legendary S-rank adventurers. Aliceret, the demon child of devastation, Mizet, the 1,000-year workshopper, and Browson, the sage beast. Overwhelmed by their power, the butler leader decided to retire in peace, acknowledging the impossible odds. As the Orichalcum party continued their rampage, Rick decided to leave, determined to do his best in the test despite the chaos behind him. Back in the exam building, Rinet kept Freed dangling by his collar, waiting for Rick's return. Freed, struggling to speak, suggested Rick wouldn't be back since the place he sent him was filled with guards. Just then, Rick reappeared, apologizing for the delay, leaving Freed astonished. Freed, unable to comprehend how Rick was unharmed, muttered in confusion. Rinet, casually tossing Freed aside, sent him flying into a wall, making it clear why Rick apologized. Rick, noticing the damage to the wall, questioned Rinet, who nonchalantly admitted she had torn through it just a little. Rick could only marvel at her strength. Suddenly, Lynx Lorad appeared, weak and stumbling. He collapsed and upon regaining consciousness, explained to Rick that Raster had attacked him. Lynx recounted how Raster had asked about his dream and mocked him for wanting to build a school for aspiring adventurers in his poor, remote hometown. Raster had deemed such a dream foolish for someone like Lynx, who he considered third-rate. Rick listened, his anger growing as Lynx described the humiliating encounter. Despite Lynx's warning to withdraw from the test, fearing Rick would face worse, Rick remained resolute. He assured Lynx that the timing of one's start shouldn't matter and then left, with Rinet silently following. At the stadium, Raster vented his frustration by blasting away his butler with magic, berating them for their incompetence. One of the butlers, staggering towards the gate, managed a feeble apology before collapsing. Understanding the situation, Raster realized that Rick was approaching. Raster anticipated Rick's arrival, imagining the pleasure of seeing Rick's hard work and passion crushed, thinking it would be amusing. However, he decided instead to make Rick suffer in a way that would make hell seem tame. He cast a fire wall spell at the stadium gate, preparing for Rick's arrival. Rinet, watching from the audience, observed the scene as Rick, filled with rage, approached the gate. Inwardly, Rick was determined to confront Raster and make him pay. At the stadium, the E-Rank exam's second test, a mock battle was underway with Raster Diarmid as the examiner. Raster, known as A-Rank adventurers that often tested participants beyond necessary. Adolf, acting as the host from the audience's side, possessed a unique ability to visualize individuals based on the 4 foundational faculties: physical strength, body control, magic reserves, and magic control. His expertise in assessing these faculties gave him insights into an examinee's abilities. The examinees showed balanced scores across all categories, though they were so low. Raster easily dispatched the examinees with his superior magical abilities, prompting Adolf to analyze Raster's abilities. He discovered Raster had maximum magic reserves and moderate scores in other faculties, confirming his A-rank status. As Adolf strained his eyes to see Raster's scores, he screamed in pain. He realized the danger of looking at someone too strong. Next, Rick Gladiator entered the stadium. Adolf noticed Rick, who looked dreary and out of place for his age. Adolf attempted to visualize Rick's abilities and was shocked to find that while Rick had no magic reserve score, his other faculties were beyond the maximum. His eyes were given up before he finished, and he collapsed in pain. Rinet was on her way to join the other Orichalcum party members at the stadium audience section when Elisa greeted her. They both introduced themselves to each other. Elisra Drakel was sitting on the audience bench with the other Orichalcum party members, Bralston Ashork and Mizit Eldwarf. She waved to Rinet, inviting her to join them. Rinet turned to Elisa and asked if she would like to join the group. Elisa accepted the invitation and took her seat along with Orichalcum party members. Rick entered the stadium confidently. Ralston wondered about Rick's progress as a promising older rookie. Rinet assured them that Rick would pass the exam without issues. Elisa mentioned Raster, the examiner, being an A rank who often overwhelmed examinees unnecessarily. Ralston didn't see it as a problem under the circumstances. Rinet agreed with him. Mizit noted that the exam was about to begin. Meanwhile, Elisra was focused on eating cake and paid no attention to Rick entering the stadium. Angelica Diarmut was at the stadium section too. She cheered enthusiastically for her brother. She urged Raster to defeat Rick, calling him a 40-ish-year-old oaf. Freed Diarmut, with bandages covering his body, joined Angelica. He pleaded with Raster to avenge him. In the stadium center, Raster and Rick faced each other. Raster began the duel by casting a level 1 nature-composed magic ice shot without any incantations. The ice bolt flew rapidly towards Rick but missed, striking the wall behind him. Rick reminded himself not to let anger take control and to stay calm and rational. He recalled Rinet's advice to use the first minute of the match to calm his feelings and focus on observing his opponent. Rick acknowledged his worries but chose to trust in Rinet's guidance. Raster noticed that Rick had no intention to attack and decided to act freely. Raster then cast a level 3 nature-composed magic, Flame Illuminate, without a full incantation. Rick recognized the impressive feat but remained focused on observing. A blaze of fire moved towards Rick, engulfing him and the surrounding area. When the fire and smoke cleared, Rick stood unharmed, though the ground around him was scorched and scattered. Brosnan explained that for Rick, the attack was trivial and didn't qualify as taking a hit. Elisa questioned this, finding it hard to believe. Brosnan emphasizes that magic reserves must be developed while one is young, or else there is no hope of further growth. Elisa understood, noting that Rick had become an adventurer when he was 30, which meant his situation was unique. Brosnan confirmed her thoughts, explaining that because Rick started late, his magic reserves were extremely low. This was why Rick's approach to magic and combat was different from others who had trained from a young age. The scene shifted to a flashback of Rick's training under Brosnan. Brosnan emphasized that Rick could always rely on his own body, and Rick was ready to learn. Brosnan then instructed them to go to the next village, but Rick noticed the heavy steel balls chained to his legs. Rick questioned the purpose of the weights, each weighing 100 kilograms, finding them excessively heavy. Brosnan assured him that they should pose no difficulty as they were just starting. He then warned Rick to keep up, mentioning a den of carnivorous monsters in the forest. As Brosnan started moving towards the village, two gigantic snakes appeared behind Rick. Rick struggled to run with the weights on his feet. Back at the stadium, Brosnan reflected on Rick's training. To compensate for his lack of magic reserves, Rick trained exhaustively in the other three areas: physical strength, body control, and magic control. Meanwhile, in the fight, Raster prepared his next attack, a more powerful spell. He cast level 4 nature-composed magic, Hurricane Cutter, sending an air cutter towards Rick. Rick blocked the attack with his bare hands. A small blast from the attack reached the audience area where the Orichalcum party was seated. Brosnan explained that he had built up Rick's physical strength from scratch. Elisa, still in awe, listened intently. Brosnan continued, mentioning that Mizet had taught Rick magic control. Mizet, despite his dislike for bothersome tasks, had been impressed enough with Rick to continue teaching him for 2 years. Mizet noted that teaching Rick was necessary to ensure he could put up a magical defense. Brosnan mentioned that Renette had trained Rick in body control. Elisa, surprised, thought Renette was just a regular maid. Mizet explained that Renette's clothes were just her style, not an indication of her skills. Brosnan concluded that Rick had embraced all the training given to him. He now stood within the realm of S rank, the same as the Orichalcum party members. Meanwhile, Raster continued his assault. He cast level 4 nature-composed magic, Shock Burn. A lightning bolt emerged and struck Rick instantly, but Rick managed to block and endure it without hassle. In the audience, Elisa and the Orichalcum party observed Rick's battle. Elisa was surprised to hear that Rick might be S rank, while Renette added that Rick had no awareness of his own strength. A flashback showed Rick's training with Brosnan. Rick's hands were broken after punching a boulder with all his might. Brosnan, bluffing, told Rick he had a long way to go, as even an F-rank adventurer should destroy the boulder with one blow. Determined, Rick decided to carry on despite the pain. Back in the present, Mizet remarked that Rick's unawareness of his own strength was due to Brosnan's training methods. Meanwhile, Raster continued his barrage of attacks on Rick. 2 boulders emerged on either side of Rick, clamping him in place. The Diarmid siblings cheered Raster from the audience. Fried shouted happily and Angelica smiled broadly. Raster admitted he might have gotten a little worked up. Rick then pushed and destroyed both boulders, frustrating Raster even more. Angelica, in wonder, questioned who this 40-something-year-old man could be. Raster prepared his ultimate move, Forceful Fist, Quadrillions, Flickering Feet, Thousandths. He moved towards Rick at blazing speed, determined to finish the fight. However, Rick countered Raster's mighty attack with a simple punch, driving Raster back and throwing him away. Raster was in wonder, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Rick, however, understood. Raster had been so preoccupied with the talents he was born with that he neglected to refine and further them. Although Raster had vast reserves of magical energy, the rest of his skills were far too sloppy. Rick realized that against an opponent like this, there was no way he would lose. Raster believed that Rick's counter was a mere coincidence and warned him not to push his luck. Raster summoning the blazes of fire engulfing the area in flames. Fried shouted proudly, recognizing Raster's full incantation magic. Raster then condensed the fire into a large ball and hurled it at Rick. Rick blocked the massive fireball with his bare palm, demonstrating his precise magic control. Elisa watched in amazement, while Mizet explained that Rick's precise control allowed him to use only a fraction of the energy his opponent did. Despite his amazement, Raster insisted that Rick's success was due to a series of coincidences and warned that there wouldn't be another chance for him. Raster took his stance, preparing to use his swift movement technique. His feet flickered as he moved, but Rick could see his movements easily. Rick noted that Raster was too slow and threw a punch towards his face. Raster quickly responded by casting a spell to harden his body, barely blocking Rick's punch with both hands. The force of the punch still flung Raster far away. Angelica watched the fight in awe, realizing that even though her brother used strengthening magic, Rick did not. She recognized that Rick's abilities were far from normal. Raster persisted despite the pain in both his hands. He acknowledged Rick's abilities above those of E rank and admitted to growing tired from testing more examinees than planned. He noted Rick's apparent luck and questioned his reluctance to acknowledge Raster's superiority. Rick explained that he relied on body control, not magic, and emphasized his superior precision compared to Raster's strengthening magic. Raster asked how Rick had become so strong in just 2 years given his limited magic. Rick recalled his intense training, defeating a dragon in its lair, running through explosions, and swimming through dangerous fluids used for monster capture. Eliza, listening in the audience, was shocked and questioned if Rick had died during his training. Roston confirmed this, explaining that his healing magic could bring someone back to life immediately after death. Elisa gasped, realizing the extreme measures Rick had endured. Mezet remarked that Rick had truly persevered. In a flashback, Mezet trained Rick on top of a hill. Rick trembled at the thought of jumping from such a height. Mezet, however, did not hesitate and kicked Rick off the hill before he could protest. Rick fell, and Mezet instructed him to feel the wind with his whole body to develop a sense of seeing the wind. Mezet then called for a healer. Another flashback showed Elissaret training Rick. She cast a spell that caused a gigantic boulder to appear in the sky and hurled it toward Rick. Rick attempted to counter with a level 1 nature-composed magic spell, but his magic circle was too small to stop the massive boulder. In another memory, Renette trained Rick under a waterfall. Several large logs fell from the top, and Renette skillfully chopped them with her bare hands, explaining that the trick was to use the weight of the falling objects. Rick tried to replicate this but failed, getting hit by the falling wood and ending up unconscious under the waterfall. Raster scoffed at Rick's claims, dismissing them as outrageous lies. He questioned what could possibly motivate someone to undergo such extreme training. Rick compared himself to Lorat, mentioning how his dreams serve as his motivation. Raster mocked Rick's dream of defeating Kaiser Alcipiat, the world's strongest monster. Fried laughed loudly, but Angelica silenced him with a serious look. Raster continued laughing, doubting Rick's sincerity in pursuing such a lofty goal. Elisa recognized Kaiser Alcipiat from the legends of the hero Yamato. Renette confirmed that Kaiser Alcipiat was indeed a legendary monster, aligning with the Orichalcum Fist's ultimate goal. Raster scoffed at Rick's ambition, dismissing the legends of the hero Yamato as mere bedtime stories unfit for serious consideration. Rick calmly responded that whether Raster believed in the legends or not was irrelevant to his own pursuit. Raster, growing impatient with Rick's defiance, decided it was time to end their confrontation. He cast a powerful spell, summoning tree roots from the ground to bind Rick's limbs. Rick, surprised by Raster's skill in using high-level magic without a full incantation, acknowledged his opponent's proficiency. Raster, undeterred by Rick's resilience, prepared to demonstrate his true power. He began a grand incantation, invoking the forces of nature with a level 8 nature-composed magic spell. Rick recognized the enormity of Raster's incantation and the immense magic power it represented. Raster unleashed his ultimate technique, manipulating giant tree roots to form a colossal figure controlled by his own will. Fried and Angelica cheered for Raster's devastating move, while Elisa marveled at witnessing level 8 nature-composed magic for the first time. Raster cast his ultimate spell, level 8 nature-composed magic, Yggdrasil God Impact. A gigantic figure began throwing a punch towards Rick. Rick countered with his own punch. As their fists clashed, Raster's mocking laughter turned into screams of pain. Rick's level 1 nature-composed magic utterly destroyed Raster's level 8 nature-composed magic, sending Raster flying. Raster landed in the audience space far from the stadium center, near Fried and Angelica. In disbelief, Raster uttered that such a defeat could not happen to a noble like him before losing consciousness. Angelica, shocked, called out to her brother. Rick, standing victorious, pointed out that his dream remained completely unharmed. The audience buzzed with amazement. One spectator marveled at Rick's unexpected victory, while another noted his unassuming appearance. Elisa praised Rick's incredible achievement, acknowledging his remarkable abilities. At the stadium entrance, Rick was greeted by the Orichalcum party and Elisa. Renette praised Rick's performance, while Broston commended his striking skills. Mizet chimed in, and Elissaret congratulated Rick enthusiastically. Rick expressed gratitude and reflected on his growth, realizing he had underestimated himself all along. Amidst the celebration, the Diarmid brothers suddenly appeared. Raster insisted he was fine despite his condition, prompting concern from Angelica. Rick addressed Raster, acknowledging his disbelief at losing to a late starter like himself. He offered advice on honing skills through exhaustive training. Raster, still unwilling to accept defeat, vowed to win in their next encounter. Fried and Angelica followed Raster as he left, with Angelica briefly pausing to bow to Rick before joining her brother. It was time to announce the results. Rick stood with Reenet as the others went to eat. The announcer read out the numbers of those who passed the E-rank test. Reenet noted Rick's calm demeanor, which contrasted with his nervousness during the preliminary exam. Rick acknowledged this, and he was just remembering a few things. Rick Gladiator stood alongside Reenet Elfeld, listening intently to the announcement of the exam results. His registration number, 4242, had not yet been called. As the numbers of those who had passed the test were being read aloud, they had reached 4065. Rick appeared calm and composed, a stark contrast to his earlier nervousness during the preliminary exam. Reenet, noticing his change in demeanor, felt curious about what had caused it. When she asked, Rick simply told her that he had just remembered something. The scene shifts to a flashback when Rick was a child. He often immersed himself in storybooks, losing himself in tales of adventure and heroism. One day, as he read aloud with excitement, he came across a page depicting an adventurer battling a fearsome monster. The story told of defeating the ultimate monster, Kaiser Alcipe, to obtain a treasure capable of granting any wish, the Akashic Records. The book mentioned that although the adventurer could not defeat the monster, future adventurers might succeed and have their wishes granted. Rick's enthusiasm filled the room as he read, catching the attention of his parents. His father and mother, hearing his dreams of becoming an adventurer like the legendary Yamato, were less than supportive. His mother expressed her concern about the dangers of adventuring, fearing for his safety and preferring he choose a safer path. His father dismissed the tales as mere legends, urging Rick to pursue a more stable and respectable profession. Rick felt disheartened, realizing his parents did not share his passion for adventure. The weight of their disapproval made him look down, knowing his dreams were not aligned with their expectations. On another day, Rick had a medical checkup. The doctor informed him that a marker indicating an inborn skill had been found in his system. This marker was rare, making Rick one of the few individuals possessing it. However, the exact nature of his skill remained unknown. The news filled Rick with excitement, and he immediately thought of Yamato from the Legends of Yamato. The idea that he might have a similar power to his hero was thrilling. The doctor explained that this skill wasn't something Rick could manifest through training, he just needed to wait for it to emerge naturally. Overjoyed by the revelation, Rick left the clinic and ran towards the hill near the city, a broad smile on his face. Reaching the top, he felt a surge of determination and hope. He was eager to prove to his parents that he had a special gift, just like Yamato. As he stood there, gazing at the horizon, he shouted with all his might, declaring his intention to become an adventurer. The next morning, Rick woke up with excitement, staring intently at his hands as if willing his inborn skill to manifest. At school, his friends gathered around him, curious about any developments. When they asked if his skill had appeared, Rick admitted it had not, explaining that it wasn't something that would show up overnight. The following morning, his friends inquired again, and Rick reassured them to be patient. Days turned into months, and on another morning, his friends remarked that a year had passed without any sign of his skill. Rick speculated that it might not show up while he was still a child. At night, he would hold his hands near a candle, clenching them tightly in hope. As time went by, Rick became a teenager. His friends reminded him that some people never manifested a skill despite having the marker. They suggested he become an adventurer in the meantime, pointing out that many adventurers didn't have special skills and could still make good money. However, for Rick, adventuring wasn't about wealth. Years passed and Rick reached adulthood. His mother asked if he had found a job, and Rick shared that he had been hired as a receptionist at a guild called Tiger Road. His father expressed pride in Rick's respectable and stable job. Working at the Tiger Road Guild, Rick was swamped with paperwork, but still clung to his dream of becoming an adventurer. He often met young aspiring adventurers and made friends with some of them, which kept his hope alive, albeit not as fervent as in his youth. As his parents grew older and their hair turned white, Rick would often look at his old storybook with a sad expression. His once high hopes for an awakening had eroded over the years, and a small spark of his childhood dreams still lingered. At the guild reception, Elisa was at the desk, confirming the completion of commission number 3457, which involved suppressing a large outbreak of slimes. She seemed puzzled as she tried to calculate the reward. Rick noticed her confusion and approached to assist. The reward for the slime elimination was a modest 20,000 luck, a small amount considering the effort required. Elisa felt disheartened about giving such a small reward to the hardworking adventurers, but Rick stepped in to handle the situation. The adventurer who had completed the task thanked Rick before leaving, casually referring to him as an old man. Rick, feeling a bit indignant, thought to himself that he was only 30 years old. Elisa expressed her gratitude for Rick's help, and he reassured her to take her time and not rush. Rick also mentioned that monsters have been appearing in town lately and anticipated that a quest would be announced soon. He explained that these were mostly low-level monsters driven out of their lairs, likely resulting in a D-rank quest, Eliza nodded, understanding the situation, and went off to prepare for handling the matter quickly. Meanwhile, Zaid, a newly promoted B-rank adventurer and an old friend of Rick's, approached the reception. Zaid had been friends with Rick since his early days of adventuring. He proudly showed Rick his new B-rank medal, signifying his promotion. Rick congratulated Zaid wholeheartedly, recognizing the significance of his achievement. Now Zaid could finally make a living through adventuring alone, a milestone he had long aspired to reach. Rick, slightly drunk, walked home in his receptionist uniform. As he wandered, he reflected on his life. Zaid had reached B rank as an adventurer, while Rick had spent the past 14 years doing the same work, stuck in the same place. Lying on the grass instead of heading home, he mused about the stability and comfort of his current life, yet couldn't help but wonder what might have been if he had pursued adventuring. His thoughts were interrupted by screams. People were shouting about monsters. Rick saw a gigantic troll nearby, a mid-level monster that seemed out of place. A lady with groceries walked by, oblivious to the danger. Rick ran towards her, positioning himself between her and the troll, urging her to stand back. The lady confidently stepped forward, flicked her finger, and instantly destroyed the troll. The lady thanking Rick for his attempt to save her, she introduced herself as an adventurer. Rick, stunned by her power, asked for her name and rank. She revealed herself as Renette Elfelt, an S-rank adventurer. Rick was taken aback by the revelation of Renette's S-rank status. He recalled rumors that S-rank adventurers were directly overseen by headquarters, marking them as elite among the lights. He never imagined he would meet one. Feeling both fortunate and nervous, he decided to ask her a long-held question. He explained his childhood dream of becoming an adventurer and defeating the legendary Kaiser Alcipete, mentioning his inborn skill that had yet to manifest. He wondered if, at the age of 30, he still had a chance to pursue this dream. Renette reassured him, acknowledging the courage he displayed earlier, an essential trait for any adventurer. However, she pointed out the harsh reality of magical reserves, which were difficult to develop beyond youth. She explained that developing these reserves was not just hard, but almost impossible for someone his age. Given that a certain amount of magical reserves was crucial for adventurers, she had to be honest with him. If he tried to become an adventurer now, there was no chance he would make it. Rick felt a pang of sadness as the reality of his situation settled in. Renette's honesty helped him understand that his dream of becoming an adventurer was no longer feasible. Surprisingly, this realization brought him relief. The burden of clinging to an unattainable dream lifted, and he felt a strange comfort in the truth. He expressed his gratitude to Renette, thanking her for the candid advice. Meeting someone of her caliber had brightened his day, and in a light-hearted moment, he joked about having a meal together sometime. To his astonishment, Renette accepted the invitation, suggesting they meet the next day. Rick was taken aback by her unexpected agreement, feeling a mix of surprise and excitement. The prospect of spending more time with this remarkable adventurer added a new, unexpected twist to his evening. Rick started the day in high spirits. His cheerful demeanor caught the attention of his colleague. As Rick finished his work for the day, he walked home singing joyfully, thinking about the dinner he had planned with Renette. His thoughts were filled with optimism, hoping the evening might lead to something more. Suddenly, the streets erupted in chaos. People were scrambling and screaming about another monster attack. Rick's heart sank at the unfortunate timing. Rick rushed toward the city outskirts, noting the unusual number of monster sightings recently. As he arrived, he found Renette standing amidst a pile of defeated monsters, her calm demeanor contrasting with the chaos around her. She greeted Rick, reassuring him that his worries were unnecessary. More monsters approached, and Rick, realizing he would only be a hindrance, stepped back to let Renette handle the situation. Renette drew a needle concealed on her thigh's strap, wielding it like a sword. With swift, precise movements, she dispatched every monster nearby. Renette's expression changed as she sensed a terrible presence. Trembling, she knelt, overcome by fear. A gigantic creature resembling a werewolf, but more menacing, appeared. Zaid and his companions arrived. He joked about Rick choosing a monster-infested place for a date, but Rick was concerned. A female companion used her forceful fist to shatter the ground, while the male companion launched a powerful blizzard rock shot, defeating many monsters. Zaid gathered his team in front of Rick, explaining that the guild had issued an emergency quest. He advised Rick and Renette to stand back. The adventurers continued their battle, displaying impressive skills. Zaid cleared the remaining monsters with his Hurricane Cutter spell, leaving Rick in awe. Renette revealed the terrifying truth. A dragon was nearby. She explained that her body reacted traumatically to a dragon's magic, causing her to lose control of her own abilities. Rick found it hard to believe that a dragon could appear so close to the town. Suddenly, the sky darkened and a massive dragon descended, landing near them. The realization hit Zaid as he questioned the dragon's presence in a human town. Rick understood then that the dragon was the reason the monsters had been fleeing. Zaid realized the gravity of the situation and explained the cardinal rule: adventurers lower than A rank should avoid dragons. In a panic, Zaid's male companion cast a spell at the dragon, but it only angered the beast further. The dragon roared, setting a powerful wind that blasted everyone around. Zaid quickly realized they couldn't fight the dragon and urged everyone to run. However, the roar was actually a spell that created a barrier, trapping them. Zaid tried to break it with his axe but failed. Panic set in as they realized the dragon wasn't planning to let them escape. Amid the chaos, Rick stepped forward to face the dragon. Zaid, astonished, reminded Rick he was just a receptionist. Rick, determined, decided if they were going to die, he would face the dragon and perhaps die as an adventurer. Despite knowing it was impossible to fight the dragon, Rick felt a surge of courage. With a loud scream, Rick picked up a large stone and threw it at the dragon. It caused no damage but inspired Zaid and his companions. They decided to join the fight, not wanting a receptionist to lead. They attacked the dragon together. Despite their efforts, the dragon was too powerful and became angrier. Flames gathered around its mouth, signaling a fiery breath attack. Zaid cast a defensive spell to strengthen them, but the dragon's breath was so powerful it blasted them away. Rionette, filled with regret, wished she could fight the dragon. To everyone's surprise, Rick stood up. Rionette was astonished that Rick could still stand after the dragon's fire. She called out to him, but the dragon stomped on him and Zaid feared the worst. Miraculously, Rick awakened his dormant abilities. He lifted the dragon's gigantic foot with one hand and punched it away with the other. A magical aura surrounded him as he displayed newfound strength. Rick acknowledged his inborn skill, feeling a voice within him. Ready to test his new power, he taunted the dragon. When the dragon launched a fire beam at him, Rick created a barrier with his left hand, fending off the attack. The dragon followed with a freezing beam, but Rick's barrier held strong. Preparing his right fist, Rick unleashed a powerful attack. Brute Valor awakened, which emitted a magical beam that destroyed the dragon instantly. The barrier surrounding them faded as the dragon fell, defeated. Everyone was amazed by Rick's strength and his ability to defeat the dragon. Exhausted and with heavy breaths, Rick looked at his fist and collapsed. Rick woke up in the hospital. Rionette sat by his side, urging him to stay still. Rionette explained that every magic circuit in his body had been destroyed, leaving him as good as dead. He had been unconscious for a week. He wondered why she had stayed. Rionette surprised him by inviting him to join her party, Orichalcum Fist. Their goal was to defeat Kaiser Alcipiat, aligning with Rick's dream. Rionette's words had a deep impact. She praised his courage and assured him that despite his age and the long path he had taken, he still had the potential to grow stronger and fight with them. Her promise that he could become an adventurer brought tears to Rick's eyes. Back in the present, Rick stood with Rionette, listening intently to the announcement. When his registration number 4242 was called, a sigh of relief washed over him. He had passed. As Rick and Rionette walked together, he looked at the B-rank adventurer medal in his hand. Rick paused, then declared himself an adventurer. This is the end of the Ossan Newbie adventurer, trained to death by the most powerful party, became invincible episode 4. Thank you so much for staying on this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest content. See you in the next video.